Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And today we're going to do a little bit of an exercise where we run through some of the frequently asked questions that folks bring to Mark and myself, and maybe even a couple I've picked off of the AI advisor that I've seen a couple of you talking to, and just provide those answers as a way to allow everybody to learn from those FAQs. I think it'll provide a refresher for many of you who are on these calls regularly or are regularly working with group long-term care. But I think for many, there are questions that you may have always wanted to ask us, but may have been a little shy to do so. So maybe some of these FAQs will cover that. And I also think if you have any questions that you'd like to ask of us, this is a great safe, easy space to be able to ask those questions aloud, and we'll tackle those as well. Many of us are in varying levels of experience in working with groups, in group long-term care in general. So we want to meet everybody where they're at and be able to give you the answers you need to feel comfortable with whatever stage you're in. Even if it's a case that you're working on that you have specific questions about, you don't have to give anybody's name or anything like that, but you can feel free to speak aloud on that and we'll help you through it. So, um, Mark, I want to start by uh, answering the most common FAQ that I get, and I want you to think about the most common that you get. But for me, the question I get most of all is what's the minimum group size that I can look at and get a group plan for? And it's a really good question. This question was answered differently even a year ago. The market's constantly changing, adapting. We're running into new carriers that are offering new sweet spots. It really is going to depend on the carrier. So Allstate is actually going to be able to go down to the lowest group size. They're able to go down to groups of three eligible employees. Um, with that three, they have a six app minimum. So as long as you're enrolling one other voluntary benefits product, like an accident indemnity, critical illness, hospital indemnity, whatever it may be, as long as that other product is added and there is employer funding to ensure we hit that six app minimum, that is the lowest we can go, is three employees. And that accident or critical illness coverage comes at an extremely affordable rate. So it really isn't going to add much to the extra funding to be able to put something like that in place. So it's a really good option for down to three. Transamerica is going to offer coverage down to five employees, and that's our second lowest right now. Um, Transamerica offers really, really high simplified issue limits. So being able to get in the door with them at five employees is really, really nice because then you get access to a lot of coverage provided you can get through simplified underwriting, but there's also a guaranteed issue amount normally for groups of five of around 50,000 a death benefit, 100,000 a long-term care for those groups. So we have options almost as low as you can go, but then we have Chubb and Trustmark who will generally look 100 plus most of the time. In rare exception bases, they'll look down to 50 plus, but three is actually the true minimum we can look at here.
Jason,
Um,
let me also kind of give a crack at it, and I'm going to use the buddy system just to help because you don't have to memorize these limits. One of the reasons we built the group product buddy in the buddy system is because you can select your group size, and once you do select the group size, it's going to tell you which carriers are available. And it's also going to tell you where they have the extension, restoration, and LTC riders. So all of those things, right, we have a database on, and we try to keep that up to date for you so that when you do use this tool, you can go right to the current answer. Because what we're saying today, who knows, next month we might have a new product or a carrier that's entering the small group market. But as Jason pointed out, these two actually have what they call small group solutions. And they have a specific division of their worksite company that is dedicated to providing it to small groups. The other carriers don't have that yet, but might decide to add these products to those solutions in the future.
yep, yep, super good. So have you done a little thinking? What's the
Yeah.
question you get asked most often, Mark?
I get a lot of questions like specific to states. There's quite a lot of FAQs, as you know, but one of them is what's available in New York. And again, another good reason to use the tool, go down to what state you want to select. I'll choose New York here. And again, it's going to give you the answers and tell you where, again, what's available and not available. So really important to kind of use this for even state-specific questions. And also, there's a lot of answers that you get if you select this and you want to understand the policy better. It's going to also show you, kind of how the policy mechanics works. So, a lot of questions about product, right? So, which carriers, how does their LTC hybrid work, and some of those types of things.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of these tools were built off of the FAQs and the questions we were getting a lot. So there's a lot of thought put into that. Um, Now, another common FAQ that I get, and I know that you get a lot, is not so much a very specific question, but it's kind of like, help, where do I start? I don't even really know where to begin. I've got this group that's on the periphery of my mind and vision, and I'm gonna go approach them, but I don't actually know where to start or what to talk about or what to do with my hands. So what do I actually do when I'm dealing with a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, I always start with what is the need for long-term care. With the employers, there's two levels of that. We're used to talking to individuals and talking about caregiving, right? If you're going to have family caregiving, might it not help them to have professional caregiving to support that? How do we fund professional caregiving? And then we talk about leverage, and that gets you into why the product solves that problem. At the company level, you have to think about how does offering this benefit help the company, especially in most cases because you're going to need employer funding for groups that are under, 500 employees. You really need employer funding to get participation to make it worthwhile for the company to do this. Well, it's to attract and retain key people, right? It could be a lot of business reasons why offering this as a benefit is going to help them achieve their company goals, and this is a solution for that. So those are the first two things not to ever forget is while we might nerd out about products and really try to understand it, that's all doesn't matter to the client until they understand the why long-term care planning is important and also why getting a starter plan is important. I think another FAQ is this going to provide enough coverage? And the answer is, well, most people currently have zero.
Correct.
So let's start off by getting them something, some few hours of care to help their family, and then we can talk about more comprehensive coverage. But if there's this expectation in your mind or in their mind that, this is going to be, a full comprehensive plan that covers the full cost of care, I think those days are long gone, to be honest with you, in long-term care insurance in general. And it really is about how do we solve the most painful parts of this crisis? How do we solve for the first dollars of care that are needed? And thinking about how to solve those problems in ways where we have a very robust insurance market today.
Yeah, and I don't want to put you on the spot or stir you from what you're currently doing, but I know we have David on the call today, and he and I are actually teaming up on a group long-term care case right now, and we've kind of gone over, how do we want to tackle this approach, and just kind of going over some tips from calls that I've been on with employers. And the answer was quite similar to what you're saying is you got to put your employer hat on and you got to kind of think like them and apply your long-term care expertise through that lens, right? What's important to them? What are they seeing? If any employees are dealing with a caregiving situation, the employer may not know it, but they may see some of the symptoms, right? Showing up to work late, leaving work early to have to care for a loved one, things of that nature, or even it's a company in a highly competitive industry, right? That is trying to not only keep their really talented employees from going somewhere else and chasing better benefits, but also to attract some of that talent, right? To make sure that they've got a really strong talent base. Maybe they want to compensate some of their key executives in more creative ways than just giving them a raise or splitting up how they do their bonuses. Maybe this can be part of that sort of bonus package. So I think beyond kind of thinking like they do, you have to ask the right questions at the end of the day. And it really starts with how are you normally doing other benefits? What other types of benefits are you offering to your employees? And how do you actually go about that culturally? Are you paying for any benefits for your employees currently? So just kind of understanding their makeup will help you be a bit more consultative. I think it's got to be a lot of listening like it does even on an individual long-term care sale, asking really good questions and giving them time to kind of give you the complete answer that you need to be able to find a good fit for them. So that really covers a couple of FAQs that I had, like where do I start? What are the important questions to ask? But I also get a lot of, oh yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
and I was going to say, we try to nudge you in the right direction through a lot of the one pagers that we have. The goal of those is to have you be in a position where when you're presenting, long-term care, you're kind of leading off with the right discussion points. So if you go to the marketing section and you can filter on a group worksite here, there's this product features document that I like to use. And when you open this up, you can create a free Canva account to access this. You'll see the why LTCI to the very first section, and it walks through some talking points that are going to help you not miss those key things. So use these one pagers. This one in particular, I use quite often. And then the one that's on Product Buddy as well, I use quite often because this is a downloadable one pager that goes through the product features. And again, you don't have to memorize it, and it kind of takes you through the FAQs and what your clients are going to be thinking or asking about. And you can create a visual aid out of that conversation at the same time.
Yep, 100%. Now, another one of the major FAQs, Mark, is um, I know that people are going to enroll in this group long-term care plan. So why should I have to pursue employer funding?
Well, the funny thing about this long-term care space is the voluntary participation, even if you think you have a lot of participation, it kind of evaporates when all of a sudden, somebody's asked to put in their banking information into the enrollment platform. I think it really is important if you're going to do an all voluntary that you actually do a survey first. We've started to do that quite often and just say, hey, how much coverage would you like to buy when we offer this? Just ask people to almost commit to it through that survey first and look at what those results are. If not enough people are electing a amount of coverage in the survey, that's a good signal that it's not going to be a successful voluntary enrollment. But the employer funding, Jason, has so many advantages for you. It's actually hard to count. You're also going to be having the employer committing to the payment so that if they have new hires, you're getting new employees that are enrolling throughout the year, right? So even that piece of it is really attractive. And the people that leave can port it and take it with them. So I hope that answered the question, but the biggest reason to do the employer funding is because your voluntary participation will be so much better and the employer is going to get their value out of what you're doing. And if they don't do that, you're going to find they're not as committed and the results are going to suffer. And I will tell you, there's so many people on this call in this industry that we work with that great, they're great at what they do, people should be buying this. We all know they should be buying it, but because it's such a limited window, for whatever reason it is, the results never develop the way that they think they do. And time again, we see the same thing. So it's hard to say you're going to be the exception to that rule.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we think we're good at this, and I think we are good at this, but we've even had enrollments where we've, partnered with folks who say, you know, the employees love the idea of this product. I've got a great relationship with the employer. I mean, any sort of chip you could bring into the conversation to say, I know for a fact people are going to enroll in this plan. And instead, we end up kind of like you said, with 20 people in the enrollment platform, halfway through the application, likely stopped off at the premium payment screen and no enrollments or uh, an amount of enrollments you can count on one hand. So I think, like you said, psychologically, everybody is down to do some sort of long-term care planning until you have to open up the pocketbook, which is why if you can get the employer to understand the importance of this, people will value it. And I think starting somewhere will actually make those people who were interested enough to be intrigued to go through the application, they may actually go through and buy more once they understand what they have through their employer and why it's valuable and why this special enrollment period really does matter. But yeah, any questions that you guys have, um, definitely feel free to ask. So, I think one thing that will really help people get a good look into this is looking at FAQs that don't just come from our community and don't just come from agents and brokers, but come from, say, HR departments or come from employees or any other partners that are sort of involved in this. But I want to start by focusing on HR because we've recently given a number of presentations that HR and you function very well as the pocket actuary who answers people's questions on our webinars. What are some of the FAQs you get there?
Well, I would say a lot of it's LTC 101, even with HR. So you're going to see a commonality with what employees will ask because HR is going to get these questions from employees and they want to be the expert, right? So they're your partner in this, your extended sales team in this. Why am I offering disability life insurance and where does long-term care fit into that? And so, like that 101 question of, well, disability covers income replacement, but how are you going to get caregiving services provided to you? Disability ends when you retire, and long-term care, right, is available throughout your entire life. So, really, just kind of those basic questions are certainly commonly asked by either party. HR has more questions, maybe on the technical side, in terms of how they enroll other benefits. So, is this a payroll deduction? Can I do a direct bill? Those types of questions in terms of implementation, well, that's going to fall on HR's shoulders. So those are questions that they commonly will have. And they want to know the value and how to present this for the client, just like we do. Understanding the mechanics of the product with the extension riders and the restoration riders is really important to them because, again, they're the ones that are endorsing this, and it's kind of on their shoulders if they're getting successful participation. And they're going to be your first purchaser. Almost always, HR is that first person to fill out the application once it's offered. So if they want to buy it for themselves, then you know that they really believe in it, they understand it enough to offer it to the others. So that's a really telltale signal. But again, HR is your client. HR is your employee here in terms of purchasing it. And they want to know about spousal coverage and all of those things too.
Yeah, I think HR is also the most forward thinking
Mhm.
because I know in the back of their mind when we're talking to them, they'll ask these questions aloud eventually, or the carrier will kind of walk them through a lot of these steps. But many of them are also thinking, okay, I've got these really helpful people who are here with me right now to implement this enrollment. But what happens when these weekly calls drop off the schedule and now it's a little bit more up to me to maintain a lot of what goes on. I think they really want to have a good understanding of how that work beyond the first enrollment really goes. So,
Mhm.
um, do you find that it's more they're asking those questions and we're answering them, or the carrier kind of takes care of those questions for them, a combination of both?
Almost always, most of the carriers we work with, and I would say some of them have been in the marketplace for a while, but especially the newer ones, they don't really understand how to position the product. Because it's a hybrid, everyone gets tripped up with focusing on the life insurance benefit. And if you're doing that, you kind of confuse the whole reason they're doing it in the first place. Well, they already have a life insurance benefit. Why are we adding more life insurance?
That's
You're
the
going to
number
go
one
down this
employee
rabbit hole.
FAQ. Yeah.
Yeah, so as soon as you bring carers into it, just be aware that they're not long-term care specialists most of the time, and they're not used to positioning it the way that we position it. So I think that's the biggest thing. In general, while the carriers will provide you some default materials, maybe like a default platform, a default enrollment page, again, it's going to be really watered down. And it's going to be what their compliance teams have approved and filed with the states when they originally designed the product before they even knew how to offer it. So I would be very reticent to lean on that too much if you really want to position this the way that we're talking about positioning it. Even some things like employer funding is not something they commonly deal with. So they just may not have the answers to your questions, and you might be seen as the expert in their eyes. So those are the general things I would say. But we love our carrier partners. They really help facilitate the things that we need to do when we have a clear path and a vision for it, and we want to lead it in a particular direction. They're the ones that are helping support that and making it a reality. So they play a very important role, but having them be the front of the house or coming up with the solution, that's where you might run into challenges.
Yeah, and they often look to us for our long-term care expertise because they want to learn and they want to get better with this as well because they're dedicated to doing a good job in this side of things. So even if many are new to this or even if they're experienced, they're always trying to learn what they can to
Yeah.
kind of improve that process.
And
But
I think because of that, they'll probably get better and better over time. And that's great for the whole ecosystem, right? To have much more informed carriers and understanding how their products are being used and how to design the products better for the
right,
future.
right, which it benefits the end consumer, which is really the whole goal here. Um, but yeah, you mentioned a question that comes up sometimes when speaking to HR. I think it's like one of the most popular employee questions to ask. It's normally asked in two ways. I already have life insurance. Why do I need this plan? And can I sort of unstaple the long-term care coverage from the life insurance coverage? I think this is one we answer on almost every single employee webinar we do. And you just got to kind of keep it simple with your answer. And the objective of the life insurance is really number one, a hedge against never needing long-term care, which is a common objection that we get out there. You all well know that. But also it's your ticket into the long-term care benefit. So the initial long-term care benefit comes from drawing down the life insurance coverage. And I think that's just an important thing to be able to know that's being commonly asked because it frames for you how people are thinking about this benefit. And oftentimes, why, when we put out any one pagers or things like that, we call it long-term care with life insurance, right? We're really trying to go long-term care first on a lot of this. And it,
Yep.
goes into a deeper discussion of why these are long-term care forward plans.
Yeah, I can't stress that what you just said enough, Jason. That is probably the number one product question is it seems counterintuitive to have your long-term care coming from life insurance. And if it's permanent life insurance, it has a stigma attached to it that it's more expensive than term life insurance. Although some of our group products, as we know, are term to age 121 or whatever it might be. And the key is, hey, would you do you like the long-term care benefits for the price and you're getting the life insurance for free? It's important to like position it the way it looks compared to the traditional long-term care market or the individual market so that you can have that counterbalance and show them that is the case. So it really is important to kind of change the perception in the hearts and the minds that way, or else you're never going to win somebody over because they just think they're paying extra for the two benefits that are bundled together instead of getting one included as an extra value when you're already buying the other.
Yeah. And it can be tough because not only carrier materials, but sometimes the way you have to explain how the benefits work is really you talk about what you purchase is you're getting a life insurance benefit, right? So sometimes just the nature of the product maybe works against you a little bit, and you have to cause that paradigm shift through your education, like the supporting education or answering questions about it, right? But the life insurance is really like the fries in the bag of this meal. Like still a very excellent part of the meal, but it's not the star piece.
Yeah, Jason, just I want to use this opportunity also to go to the group quick quote because the reason we invented Benefit Buddy, right, which is what the group quick quote is based on, is to allow you to show them the money, show them the numbers, show a long-term care forward positioning of the product, which is how we do the benefits here, the monthly and the total benefit pool. And when you look at it this way, I think you understand better the leverage for the long-term care and why it is long-term care forward. It's a great story to tell, but it comes down to do I believe what this person is telling me, and can I assess that value for myself? So that's why we have this available for every one of the top carriers that we work with. You can change the carrier here, and it's going to update the pricing for you and show you that story around the long-term care. And you can even scroll down and have it show the breakdown of the long-term care from the life insurance component, which, as you know, in the group side, a lot of times you get that restoration of the death benefits, so you can add these together, which is what we're doing in this chart. But it really does highlight the long-term care, and that story is backed up by real data, by numbers here. And they can plug in their age, and you can kind of walk through the long-term care claim story a little bit too. We get some people that say, is this policy good when I buy it? That's why we have a claim age here. You can put in age 46 and you'll see the benefits at age 46. Obviously, if you need that care right away, this is going to be even more valuable to you. We just look at it into the future to give people kind of like a base case, like a most likely scenario, right, that they can count on so that they know that regardless of whether they need care today, whether they need care, at age 80, or whatever it might be, you're still getting value from the policy. So again, it takes away a lot of those objections that, what if I'm in this situation? Does it still work? And the answer is almost universally that you're going to get value out of this policy as long as you keep it and you don't drop it.
Yeah. I I think some of these, like going over some of these FAQs, it's not about necessarily answering the FAQ that provides the learning, but it's almost like knowing that this question is commonly asked is really what provides the learning. So one of those big ones is another one we get on webinars a lot. As a matter of fact, we just got it on the one we were on, is I already own long-term disability. So what is this going to do for me that my long-term disability won't? And I think just knowing that that question is asked a lot says a lot about the fact that there are employees who really have had next to no experience maybe with long-term care and long-term care insurance whatsoever before this webinar experience or before the first couple of emails they got about this, which is really important to understand. You got to meet people where they're at, and you really have to be able to explain why this is a differentiated piece of their portfolio and how it meets their financial planning. As simple as that sounds, I think just for you all to know that employees are asking questions like that on every single webinar gives you an idea of part of the audience you're dealing with and their exposure to some of this, right? I mean, you said it yourself, Mark. Many people out there own no coverage whatsoever. Some really are being exposed to it for the first time, right? And if you're looking for the answer to that, I just call them sister products, synergistic products, and I talk about it as disability as income replacement, long-term care as paying for the caregiving that you would receive. You could very well have a long-term disability and long-term care claim at the same time, but they're going to cover different things, right? But I think just knowing that people are asking about that really speaks to you're having one-on-one conversations with a lot of folks. Any other big ones that you notice from webinars with employees?
With the employees, like you said, it's pretty common ask questions. A lot of the employees have experience with long-term care insurance when we're presenting these. Like they've looked at traditional long-term care in the past. They've been offered other long-term care products through that employer. So a lot of them will ask about inflation protection. A lot of them will ask about, you know, um, like what the limits are in the policy.
Cash
And I think
value.
that's your kind of your early clientele, the low-hanging fruit, the people that are more likely to participate. So that's the good news is they're further in the buying journey. They know a lot more about this, and you just kind of have to like satisfy those objections adequately enough. They're ready to participate. I think the reality of this is because these are like enrollment periods and you have end dates, a lot of them are earlier in that buying journey, and they just have to make a quicker decision, I guess, without as much learning involved. So for us, the microsite that we build, the webinars that we have give them that opportunity to learn. But I think it's important that it's hard to rush that decision. Be available to have a one-to-one with them. But at the end of the day, there's just some people that are not going to be ready quite yet. The good thing about this whole world that I love about it is education. where else do you get a platform to meet with dozens or hundreds or thousands of people at a time to talk about long-term care, where there's someone they trust, their employer or their association is endorsing you as the expert in this, and they should pay attention to it. Like that is like you can't put a
It's as
cost
good
of
as it
value
gets.
price on that, right? So the ability to educate and then re-enroll and re-educate the next year and to allow people to apply even throughout the year, which you can do with these products as well, even if it's simplified issue instead of guaranteed issue. Guess what? 90% of people qualify for simplified issue too. So I think that's you just got to really take advantage of the fact that you have that platform and you gotta go back to that employer and ask for permission to do more to reach out to the employees, even outside of the open enrollment. And those people that started off in that educational journey during the open enrollment, maybe they're ready 6 months later. So I think it plays out a lot like the individual side, where it might take 24 months before someone becomes aware or has a caregiving experience that this is something they want to do. Play the long game on this too. You're going to get a lot in the short run just because of the deadline and the GI, which is great because people can act quickly and not kind of have analysis paralysis around it as much if they're ready to go. But then you have this time frame when you can work with them year over year on this too. So I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, super good point. And I think, people have asked us a lot, like, what are the best types of groups to work with? And we work with a number of companies in the caregiving industry or even in the insurance industry. And I think, well, obviously, the webinar questions get far more sophisticated, but the questions we're kind of used to getting about these plans. We were on one recently for kind of an insurance-based company. And one of the employees actually unmuted and said, I just want to let you guys know I've read a little bit through the contract and it's important to know that this is actually an indemnity benefit and not a reimbursement benefit, and that's helpful, right? So just understanding why those groups are so good, you're so many months and years down the road in the long-term care conversation when you're speaking to and educating those employees that it really helps. I think there are many in that employee who are saying, yeah, long-term care, that's something I should have done years ago. So I'm actually ready for this. And given that it's affordable, given that I have so much experience, at least being around the product, this is the right time for me, right?
Yeah. Another question I get a lot, which is a tougher one to answer. So this is what I found works well, and this came up 3 or 4 times, Jason, on our in the Q&A in the webinar we just did too, is can I buy this policy for my parents?
Hmm.
And the answer, of course, is no, right? This is only covering you, maybe your spouse. But what this education allows you to do is it allows you to educate about professional caregiving services. Let people know that you don't need insurance to pay for those services. You can pay out of pocket for those services. Just the awareness alone that people have a resource to help them as a caregiver is a big deal. And is a big deal for HR to know too. Because if HR gets a question, what do I do? Well, let me connect you with Amada Senior Care, who's a home care provider that we vetted nationally, right? That they provide these services. And even if you get a couple hours of care a day, that might be a huge relief for whoever the caregiver is in that situation. It might keep them at the office longer as well, right? Not having to leave early. Let me get 2 hours of care or adult day care, right, while I'm working. I think there's a lack of awareness that those services are out there. There's a lot of fear factor because you have to get the right provider, right? Who do I find in that fragmented world? Having this preferred provider, right, vetted provider is really valuable. So it's not just about the insurance that you're doing that adds value. It's the education about caregiving that's really important here that might really help families that you're working with. And that's going to build trust and your relationship with the employer as well. And I'm
True.
sure that that person is more likely to buy it, right, as well, the insurance for themselves.
Right.
So I think you really have to take that holistic mentality, Jason, like you were saying, and leverage the community partners.
Yeah, if they're thinking about taking care of their parents and they have children, they're thinking about that exact same situation as it applies to them and their kids, right? So that is definitely a good question to receive, and it makes the employer look really good, right? I mean, on webinars, obviously we'll say it's a great thing that your employer is making this benefit available to you and so on and so forth, but we also say it's a really good thing that your employer is making this education available to you, right? So you understand all the resources that are out there, right? That just kind of grants them a lot of respect.
Just wanted to share one more thing from the portal too, is in that resources section, you'll see community partners. And if you do want to access Amada Senior Care, this is going to tell you how to get started with them and how their services work. An intake form too, where you can just fill out, get started with Amada. It's going to take you to the website where you can either start a claim for an insurance policy because they're a concierge claim filing service for you, or just find a caregiver. My client does not have long-term care insurance, right? They don't have to have insurance to get the benefits that you can provide with Amada here.
Yep, 100%. Anybody who's on the call with us have any questions, either specific or not specific? No silly questions. I'm sure we've answered a question like yours before. Anything that you would like to ask us about before we go through a couple more that we commonly get? Okay. Any others that you're getting a lot, Mark, that you want to make sure are answered for everybody's benefit?
I think people ask about tax deductibility at the
Yes.
HR business owner level. I think the reality of long-term care is that most people are not going to buy it solely for that reason. And I think the leverage of the product comes first. These group products that we see in the current space with the hybrids don't have a separately identifiable LTC premium. So in general, you're using post-tax dollars and you're getting tax-free benefits. A couple of the people on this last webinar asked about are these pre-tax or post-tax dollars? So I think it's important to understand that that's kind of the key thing, just so you don't go down that rabbit hole too much. Um, and in general, even on the individual side where it is tax deductible, I think that oftentimes doesn't lead to sales. It's a
It's like
nice,
a bonus.
yeah, it's like a cherry on the top, exactly what I was thinking. Um, let's optimize how we're going to fund this once you know you're going to do it. And then it becomes kind of like something you can sharpen the pencil on later, but it won't affect your decision about which product you're choosing or anything like that.
Yep, that's true. Um, Lisa has a great question here that I want to read. What if the parents are not near claim? How do you handle that transfer of influence from the group level to the individual level for mom and dad?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that we offer on every enrollment is to have not only a group education session, webinar, etc., but also to have a long-term care specialist consultant available for anybody that has individual planning needs, whether that's for themselves, whether they want to explore individual solutions to add to their group product, whether they want to do it instead of the group product, whether they have a challenge with mom or dad, whatever it might be. I think it is important to have someone that they can have a 15-minute Zoom with. And I think that's where you can broach that subject, or maybe helping mom and dad with an individual product. Lisa, like you were saying, maybe an annuity long-term care product is the best fit, because they're 75 years old, right? Have assets. So I think you really don't know the answer to what's right for that situation until you meet with them. And you just give them an opportunity that's low risk, right? Takes away a lot of the fear factor. And if they get to know you through the webinar directly, they're going to be more likely to want to book a meeting with you as well.
Right. Yeah, and I think just one word to the wise there is you definitely want to ask the employer's thoughts on this, but you want to make sure you're positioning it in the right way to them. Like just making sure that they understand why the specialist consultant is important, what they can offer, what they're there to do first and foremost. Because some employers are they get a little bit spooked when you mention individual long-term care specialists, and individual business, and some won't allow it. Others see the concept perfectly and are fully for it. Listen, I know this group plan isn't going to cover 100% of the planning needs for 100% of my employees, so I think it's a great idea. But others will say, Participation in this plan is first and foremost to me, and I'm afraid of having a bad experience with an employee, so I'd rather not, right? I'd just make sure you're having that conversation with the group and having it as early as you can.
Yeah, and I would say the one thing that takes away the fear factor with HR in that is just tell them that you won't have those conversations until after the special enrollment period ends.
Yep.
Nobody objects to working with individuals once the group, window is closed. But they're worried about, yeah, this becoming getting off of what the point of the whole benefit is and, during the enrollment period. So best not to like create a conflict when you have an answer that's an easy yes.
Yep. I was gonna look to see if anybody asked any really good questions of our AI advisor. Hmm. Okay. There are some questions about max age for long-term care, which is
Let's
really,
see.
really good.
Yeah.
That's also something that differs from carrier to carrier, especially if you're dealing with the smaller groups. So Allstate is going to cut their long-term care rider off at age 70 in most cases, Transamerica 65. Chubb actually offers the access the longest to the long-term care benefit up to age 80, but there is simplified issue underwriting and there is a cap on the amount of available benefit they'll be able to purchase. And Trustmark is going to vary product to product between TLC and ULE, and it may even vary group to group. But Trustmark will generally cut theirs off at 70 and still offer life insurance up to 75. I believe it may be even younger on the TLC side. I want to say up to age 65 potentially. So
Yeah.
that's a good one. Any
Yep.
others that were on your mind or anybody in the audience's mind?
Got another question in the chat here.
What happens in years two and beyond? Can you layer on additional long-term care coverage? I work with an Allstate benefits guy, and he layers on small whole life policies year after year. Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
super good question. It's another one we frequently get asked.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's yes, the answer is yes. And the answer is it's nice to start off with a foundational plan and people can add coverage later. The nuance to it is that you have to have an enrollment platform that you're working with that allows you to stack the policies because there still is an overall maximum amount of coverage that the carrier will offer, and you have to track that through your enrollment system. Some carriers will give you, like if they buy a small amount, they'll let you have guaranteed issue at a later point. So I think that's a good strategy, but you do have to know how you're going to implement it before you can offer it to a particular group.
100%. But yeah, we're always trying to make mention to just of again, the synergy with individual policies, right? Being able to claim on two at once is really helpful. That way, you're speaking to the experienced people who already own some sort of long-term care coverage or people who are looking to do any other coverage on top of the group plan.
Yeah,
Important
they're going to
to,
kind of merge the benefits together. So you're not going to like claim on both policies. You might claim on a separate carrier
right,
and another carrier at the same time,
right,
on the
right,
product
right.
at the same time, though.
Yeah. Um, all right. Anybody else have any other questions? Otherwise, it might be one of those rare times we get people out before the exact top of the hour. Unless there was anything else you wanted to kind of go over, Mark, while we're on the call.
I'll just give one more tip on the employer funded side because I think it's so critically important is make sure that you ask questions pertaining to the client's budget. I know we always focus on the benefits and the need and getting what people, really what they need, right? Getting them to that point. But at the employer side, a lot of their objective is to figure out how do I fund something at a low cost that people find value in, right? And it's not about the level of individual benefits they're offering unless they're offering it to like the owners and executives. So if you have like a particular budget in mind, even if you're asking open-ended questions like what are you spending on your group life, your group disability, right? Those type of products, then you will be able to put something in a comfortable price range for them. And almost always you can design employer funding to meet their budget. Whether you're carving out certain people, whether you're reducing the amount of coverage. Because remember, the goal of the employer funding is to get something that everyone's going to pay attention to, that the employer can endorse and give you better access. It's not the be all end all. So I think that's the one I'll say challenge is that very few groups get employer funding. And I think the way to overcome that is to make it hard to say no to it, like
Trivial.
by making it like almost a no-brainer, inexpensive for that firm. And what might be inexpensive for a big company is different from a small company, right? So really just like figuring out, how do you meet their goals with what they're trying to spend?
Right. I would agree. So I think that's it. I covered all the FAQs I wanted to cover. Thank you for those who asked questions. That will do it. So we will see you next week. I'm still working on a couple of carriers to come in and talk about other VB products. So we will have a block of meetings around that sometime in the near future. Let us know if there's any specific topic you'd like us to cover. Or if you have cases that you're working on that you'd like to kind of do as an office hour sort of setup. We're also really, really happy to do that as well. We'll also work to bring on a few more folks who are working with us kind of live and in color on group opportunities if they would be so kind to join us so that you can learn that way from folks who are not just Mark and myself. So we appreciate you being here. Be well, and we'll talk to you this time next week. Have a good one.